Okay, welcome Fidelis to our YouTube channel. We're really pleased to have you here. I just wonder if you could start off by just telling us a tiny bit about you and whereabouts you live.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having me. My name is Fidelis. Uh, I am a Kenyan citizen. I'm a social worker by training. I practice child protection, and at the moment, I'm working as a freelance consultant in project
Okay,
management with a firm based in Nairobi. We offer consultant services to clients in Kenya, in the East Africa region, and generally in the African continent.
fabulous. So
We,
tell
yeah,
us a bit, Fidelis, because our work's unique in all the different countries that we work in. So you're just saying you're working in Kenya and around Nairobi. So how does the child protection system work in your country?
in Kenya, I believe that the child protection system is coordinated by the Ministry of Social Services under the Department of
Okay.
Children Services. Yeah. Unlike other countries where I've worked in, I had the privilege of working in South Sudan, which is, let me say, the newest country in the world, the youngest country in the world. Yeah. This is a country that is just trying to set up systems, and we realize that most systems dealing with protection were coordinated by the NGO world. Unlike in Kenya here, most of the child protection work is coordinated by the ministry under the national government. Yes. Yeah.
So you were saying, Fidelis, that you're currently a consultant. So are you working in child protection at the moment?
The services that I'm offering cuts across, and they're not limited to child protection.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you do step into working with agencies within the child protection
Mhm.
system, can you just give
Mm.
us a bit of insight into what those systems are like and how they run?
I'm not sure I got your question right.
That's fine. So
Mhm.
I don't know how the child protection system, you were saying that you were setting up new systems, they're fairly new
Mm.
systems in some of the areas that you're working in. So can you give us an example of how you receive referrals and what's the practice that goes on in those
Yeah.
systems?
Mm, for instance, where when I worked in South Sudan, I realized that when I got into South Sudan in 2015, I realized that the country was just trying to set up systems,
Mhm.
and most of the things were being coordinated by the UN agencies. UNICEF was taking lead in the child protection services with assistance from other NGOs like Save the Children and other national and international NGOs. And child protection activities were being coordinated through working group forums, and at times they were also being coordinated at the national and the state level in that particular country. I also went to Sudan, and now moving from South Sudan, went to Sudan and experienced a totally different system because the area where I was working in was a completely hard to reach area, which was under rebel control. There were no government systems here, and everything was under the control of the rebel groups. But I appreciate that the rebel groups were trying to set up systems to assist uh, activities around child protection, and they had established their own, let me say, uh, semi-autonomous bodies that were taking care of activities around child protection. but with the assistance of the NGOs that were operating that area.
So it's been, as you say, it's a very new approach to child services, and you're saying it's about 10 years that this has been in progress. So what does it
Sure.
look like? What does it look like now,
Mhm.
Fidelis? Give us, give the people who
Mhm.
were listening to this, give us a
Mhm.
picture of what child protection, those services are like right now in the Sudan.
Yeah, I would say that for South Sudan, at the moment, the child protection services are quite elaborate. We have systems in place, and I really appreciate that most of the activities related to child protection have been implemented. I would say, I would say mm, most of the child protection needs have been met because of late I realized that with the return of calmness in that particular country, most of the children are now receiving activities, for instance, things like medical services, psychosocial support, and even education are quite elaborate and are getting to most parts of the country.
So give us an
Mhm.
idea.
Mhm.
If I was to arrive in
Yes.
and to work alongside you now, Fidelis,
Mhm.
um, typically what kind of
Mhm.
support are you being asked for, or give us a flavour of the lives where you're intervening or supporting. What would typically be referrals that you might come across?
Yeah, some of the referrals that I came across were especially referrals to do with separated and accompanied children.
Okay.
Yeah, because I realized that this is one of the leading causes of abuse for children because most of the children who are separated during conflict are unable to receive support from their traditional support systems, which are their
Mm-hmm.
families and their communities. So during conflict, such groups of children, you find that they are left on their own and they are likely to suffer from abuse and exploitation. So in South Sudan, there are quite elaborate uh, referral mechanisms for separated and unaccompanied children because while I was working there, we were even able to reunite a number of children with their families,
Right.
which was not quite easy,
Mm.
especially in a country that was still under conflict. But at the moment, with stability, I think things are much better. I also realized that there are quite good referral mechanisms for GBV survivors
Can you just
because
explain
children
to
who,
people what GBB is?
yeah, GBV is gender-based violence that is meted mostly towards the girl children because I realized that girls in South Sudan were vulnerable to early marriages.
Yes.
Yeah, early marriages, and yeah, that is the most common form of abuse for children. For that is the most common type of gender-based violence meted against girls in South Sudan.
And
Yeah,
when you
and
say young children, Fidelis,
mhm.
typically what would that look like in your country?
Yeah, when I say young children, is these are people below 18 and mostly 13, 14, because among pastoralist communities, even here in Kenya, where we have very strong legal systems trying to prevent child marriages, if you went to communities that practice pastoralism, you'd find that children between the ages of 13 to 15 are being married off.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the countries that are also in conflict, Sorry for that. For countries that are in conflict, then this becomes even more pronounced.
It sounds, Fidelis, I mean, I can't even put my head into your
Mm,
world of child protection. Um,
mm.
so when you're working do you work with in offices? Do you work with groups of other people? You're saying it was quite well, coordinated now. So
Mm.
just give us a flavour of, I don't know how widespread the office is, how many people work there, because you've got a large area, I presume, to cover as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For effective child protection services, it's not quite easy working from the offices. You have to be field based. And for the 5 years that I was based in South Sudan, I worked in the field, and these were very hard to reach areas. Sometimes these are places that you can't access by road. You can only access by air. And during the rain seasons, these are places that are completely cut off from the rest of the world because there are no communication systems, there are no telephone networks, there are no internet services. And so you see, you have to have proper setup mechanisms on the ground. You have to work with communities, you have to work with the local authorities in as much as they might not be officially recognized, but you have to find a way of working around with them for you to be able to achieve whatever targets or goals you have for child protection activities.
Sure, and I'm thinking, you've talked about
Mm.
things are calmer now,
Yes.
but of course the conflict,
Mm.
it's still not that far away. So
Yeah, yeah.
presumably you're
Uh,
looking at young people
mm,
you've talked about young people
mm,
being separated from families. You've
mhm,
talked about trauma. You've talked
mm,
about abuse. Um,
mm.
and then I guess on the other side of this, you'll have young people who are child soldiers as well.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about them so we can understand their
Yeah, 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 yeah,
experiences?
sure. When I worked in those two different countries, and especially for Sudan, at the moment as we speak, Sudan is still in conflict. There are quite a huge number of community members who are displaced, citizens who are displaced, and this now results into separated families. And usually, what happens during separation, we find that there are quite a number of boys or young men who who are cut away from their families or their other support systems, and so they have to look for a way to survive. And these are the people that are easily conscripted into the armed groups and armed forces. And in South Sudan back then, between 2015, 2016, and part of 2017-18, sorry for that, between those years, there, there was huge numbers of people who were separated from their families because of conflict. And we ended up having very high numbers of boys who were conscripted into the armed forces and the armed groups. Oh, I received a training, I remember, at some point where we got to intervene into assisting uh, identifying children who are associated with armed forces and armed groups. And we were able to identify them and get them out of those camps where they had been recruited into. And unfortunately, we were unable to offer them rehabilitation services because of lack of resources and the situation at hand back then. But just getting them out of those groups, I think, was a step in the right direction. Yeah.
fascinating, Fidelis. I'm just
Mm,
thinking,
mm,
thinking about the challenges of working in that kind of challenging environment. So you've described, you
mm,
know, people who are being abused,
mm,
victims, perpetrators. You've explained all about that and the struggles about the context of the work, the challenges of the country and the seasons and the lack of
mm,
resources.
mm,
So, how, just give us a flavour of if you've got concerns around young people.
mm,
Um, and like you're saying, you might have to fly out to some of these
mm,
areas.
mm.
How do you go about protecting children in those circumstances?
Yeah, in protecting children in such circumstances, the first thing you need to do is try to assist the community to be able to protect their own children. So, what we usually used to do is we used to have awareness creation sessions with the community members. You invite parents, you invite caregivers, you invite guardians, and talk to them and also just try to make them understand the importance of offering child protection services and also assist them to attain skills that uh, will come in handy in identifying children who are also facing abuse or exploitation wherever they are in the community. Yeah, because sometimes wherever conflict arises, these communities might be forced to move without you. Yeah, and so they have to have ways of protecting themselves and their own children. So I think the most important thing was giving them information and just assisting them to gain skills or empower themselves on how to protect their own children.
And
Mm.
what was most challenging about trying to do some of that work, Fidelis?
Oh. Yeah, there are quite a number of challenges, and one of the most notable challenge was the lack of communication. Lack of communication in some of the regions where I worked in was quite a challenge because even implementing activities, you really had to move from one area to the other. Because if we had a means of communication, let me say things like telephone networks or internet, then forms of communication would be made easier. Because you can imagine moving distances where you have to go like 4, 5 hours one way on foot, and you're not going to set camp there. You have to go and come back the same day because of security concerns and such issues. So it was quite challenging. And something else was the lack of national national mechanisms. Let me say laws and rules and laws and all the legal setups to assist children who are facing abuse and exploitation. Because now, at times, you could come across a child who is being abused, and there's nowhere they could report. Yeah.
And who would typically report concerns? I mean, some of them you'll be, I guess, made aware of because somebody,
Mhm, mhm,
but so
mhm,
how might you be approached about concerns around young children? Or is it a combination of people referring in and you getting some form of communication or hearing something's happening and you being
mhm,
proactive to move out there? So, how
mhm.
would you become aware of those circumstances?
Yeah, we tried setting up community child protection mechanisms. We had informers, we had people in the villages who could share information with us because these are community members who could also easily move around and they would come and pass information that this and this is happening in a particular area, and even in identifying children who are maybe recruited into the armed forces or armed groups. It's the community members who will bring this information and tell us that now you guys you need to come in and try and assist the children.
So you've spoken about,
Mm-hmm.
the real importance of getting the community together. You spoke about
Mm-hmm.
raising awareness.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about engaging them in safety planning? What kind of ways do you try and get them to support you and keep the children safe that's within their community?
Uh, yeah. Sorry. Just a minute.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
just wondering if you could just given us an idea of,
Mm-hmm.
how do you go about safety planning with those communities when themselves are probably going through very difficult times, possibly even threats, possibly they're at risk as well. So how do you approach the process of safety planning? You've already explained to us about, you're trying to educate people,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you go out safety planning with them?
Yeah. One of the ways that we can bring in safety planning is just ensuring that we have a well coordinated interagency mechanism because we have to work as a team with other agencies. This includes the other NGOs or the other service providers, the security apparatus, the national and sub-national mechanisms that are available in the area. And most important is ensuring that the community is involved from the beginning because we realize that sometimes wherever there is a conflict, child protection activities come in when things have really escalated. But if we involve the community from the beginning, especially on the outbreak of a conflict in a particular area, then they are able to handle this shock with much, let me say, absorption, and they are able to at least be resilient in a much better way.
Can you think of an example that you could share with us that would bring that to life? Can you think of a success story that you've had where you've been faced with, extremely difficult situation and you managed to safeguard a child or even more than one child, maybe several children?
Yeah, I could bring quite a number of instances, especially in South Sudan when the war broke out in 2016. The, I was in a place called Unity. Unity is a state in the northern part of South Sudan, and this was one of the epicenter of the conflict. And children were caught up. Actually, the community members, together with humanitarian service providers, were caught up in a fighting that nobody was prepared for. And in the process, we were able to mobilize and assist community members secure a number of boys who had been, should I don't know whether I should use the word kidnapped and forced into joining one of the armed actors so that they could fight the others. But through our intervention, we were able to speak to the commander of this particular group, and they released some of the boys. Yeah, and I always feel like that was quite an achievement for us.
Wow.
And yeah, on issues to do with the reunification of separated children. I also remember there was a time that war broke out and families were separated, but and families traveled hundreds of miles being separated from their children. And I was able, together with my team, to facilitate the reunification of about 8 children with their families from Unity all the way to Juba, which is about 500, 700 kilometers away.
But on a day-to-day basis, when you're doing your work, do you work with a set amount of children or families, or do you just go where the work takes you? How does that process work out?
Yeah, there are quite different contexts because, for example, here in Kenya, the systems are much more organized as compared to other regions where I worked in. For Kenya, you'll find that you're working with probably some clusters of project or program participants. But for the other regions, you are just forced to move according to need. Wherever there was need, then you are supposed to move and assist the community that was in need. But for a much stable country like Kenya, then things are much more organized. You find that wherever you're offering services, you have a well-coordinated mechanism. You have probably some NGO or some people who are doing something already with the community members, and you just come in to offer your support or your service.
So I've got to ask this question
Yes.
because the demands of the job, the challenges
Mm,
that you face, what
mm.
keeps you going? What keeps
Yeah.
you motivated and committed? You're a smiley person. I can see it on your face, but so what just keeps you going throughout all of those challenges, Fidelis?
Oh, that's quite interesting. I think one of the things that keeps me going is my family. You've just had my boys here, and they're waiting for me to finish this so that we can go have a play. Yeah, every time I look forward to coming back to them at home. And yeah, in regards to my work is the experience. I really like helping people, and this has been is something that has grown into me since I was in primary school. Like, I want to believe so, because I was always on the forefront helping my classmates wherever something came up. Yeah, I remember there's a time we got struck by lightning in school. Our school was struck, and some of my colleagues got really injured. But I did not give up because I was so terrified. I was traumatized, but I was one of the people that was trying to support them to move out of the class and yeah, get assistance from the medical services that were coming in. Yeah,
It sounds like
yeah,
it's part of you. It's the who you are. You can feel that,
sure, 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 sure.
it's the person that you
Yeah,
are. I
I
was
also
just,
love,
sorry,
I love sports.
okay.
So every time I feel down, I just get time to watch a football match. I don't know whether they call it football or soccer. As in Kenya, we call it football. So football really keeps me motivated, and yeah, it's one of my coping mechanisms.
Ju- just thinking about people that might be watching this again,
Mhm,
is there anything that you think would be important for the audience to hear that, I don't know, maybe misconceptions about social work or child protection in Kenya or Sudan?
mhm,
Is there
mhm,
anything that you think actually there's some,
mhm,
I hear people talk about this or I see things on the
mhm.
news or the way we're portrayed and I'd like to
mm,
put the record straight. Is there
mm.
anything that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, one of the things or one of the myths that I would like people to stop looking at is that if you're a humanitarian worker, then you also become a target. I noticed that I've worked in very volatile environments, and in even the armed actors in those volatile actions realize the importance of the humanitarian service providers. In most instances where I was caught up, I was protected by either one of the sides. Yeah, they're the ones who provided information and told me, go this way, go this way. So, yes, I know there are some instances where humanitarian workers have been caught up, probably injured, or some of them unfortunately killed. But if you really have the calling to be a humanitarian worker, then you really don't need to be afraid of going to those places to offer your services because there are people who are in need of your services, including those who are taking part in the conflict. Yeah.
It is humbling, as I
Mm,
said before, and fascinating.
mm,
Um, there may be people watching this, Fidelis, where they're inspired by listening to your story. The energy from you that I get listening to you, and the
mm,
warmth,
mm.
you're inspiring. So if somebody was listening
So,
to this and they were
yes. Mm,
inspired to maybe come across and do some voluntary work or some
mm,
join in
mm,
and try and support the
mm,
communities. Have you any
mm,
thoughts or ideas on that process that you have to go
mm,
through, or how they might go about that, or maybe, what your advice would be?
mm. Yeah. Sorry, come again. Sorry, Tracy.
Do you want me to say that again?
Come again, please.
Yep. Can you hear me now? Is it
Yes, yes, I can hear you. You're not
fantastic?
here.
You
Mm,
okay? So it was just asking you, if anybody was listening to this
mm,
interview and was
mm,
inspired to want to come out and do some maybe voluntary work or to work for
mm,
the government,
mm,
um, just ideas about how they might go about that process, what that process might look like. I don't know if you're able to help people, because I
mm,
don't know if it's the same with you, but certainly in most of our jurisdictions, people haven't got enough
mm,
workers. So I don't
mm,
know if that's something that's still a need there and what the process for that would be.
mm. Yeah. One thing that I would tell someone who is interested in offering such services is that you have to begin somewhere and begin small. It's it's quite challenging and sometimes traumatizing because if you are going to just get into offering services in a very volatile environment, then it might weigh you down. Yeah, you really need to begin somewhere, begin small, and you also need to have a very good support system. And I always tell people that your family is your biggest support system. Yeah, your children, your spouses, your brothers, your sisters, yeah, siblings and parents. Those are the best support systems that you can run to.
I mean, it sounds from what you're telling us, this isn't a role to be stepped into lightly.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
You're talking about the real,
Mm. Yeah, you don't just wake up and get into it because
yeah.
you might get into very discouraging experiences and you'll end up giving up so fast.
And is there anything else, Fidelis, that you think maybe viewers or communities may be watching this? Anything else that could be done to support your efforts? Is there anything else that you can think of that would, support you in that difficult, challenging work?
Mm. Yeah, one thing that I will probably say to community members is that they need to get to learn something on their own. Try to get time and gain certain skills,
Mhm.
gain certain knowledge, gain certain information, and more so information related to protecting children in your community. Yeah. This doesn't necessarily have to come from a service provider, but there are so many other platforms where someone can get such information.
And where would somebody start with that, Fidelis, if they were? Where would the starting point be?
Yeah, because I believe that information is power,
Mhm.
and whenever you have a certain kind of information with you, then whenever a situation comes up, you are able to handle that situation with much more confidence before the arrival of a service provider. Yeah.
I'm going to pass it over to Avi, if that's all right, just to check if Avi's got any more questions. I mean, I could listen to you all day, I have to say.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
so I'll just pass on to Avi and then he can check if there's anything else from your perspective, Avi.
No, Fidelis, you were absolutely
Yes, sir.
phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, and thank you for your story and sharing it with us. And I appreciate your time, given that it's night time in Nairobi right now.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Fidelis. It's
Thank
been
you,
a
Abby.
real
Thank
honor.
you,
Thank
Tracy.
you.
Yeah.